without further ado, let's kind of roll into it. We're going to follow kind of the standard format as we've done over the past few months. We'll be kind of going over upcoming events. We're talking a little bit of some NetBox news, kind of what's the latest things happening in the NetBox world, and then we'll have the really what I think the really interesting part of these calls, which is our guest speakers. So we'll have Niclas, who will be talking to us, and Bertrand talking to us about some interesting use cases of NetBox. And then finally, we will make a general call for action for any other speakers for the future. We love to hear the stories out there of how people are using NetBox in interesting and novel ways. And so we'll be making a call out for that. So in terms of events, the big event that's at least in the short term on the calendar or kind of on the horizon is next week's webinar featuring Rich Bibby, who will be walking us through the NetBox Discovery Agent and kind of doing a deep dive around a lot of the capabilities around that. So for those who might not be familiar, the NetBox Discovery, it was launched. We released it in December of 2024, so maybe 5 months ago, as an open source project that allowed discovery of network components and network devices. And we've since extended it to a number of additional capabilities, including integrations and Git-based automations and integrations with HashiCorp Vault, amongst other things. So it's been kind of constantly evolving. And so this webinar is all about kind of making sense of all of the capabilities that are enabled by this agent. So you won't want to miss it. This was happening about the same time as this call, but next week. So feel free to register for that event. I think it's going to be a very interesting, it's going to be a technical event, but a very interesting event nonetheless. And I think on events, that's all we have. In terms of NetBox news, I don't know if you've been following but closely, but yesterday, the NetBox core development team released the beta of NetBox 4.3. So NetBox 4.3 beta is now available and open. You might have noticed, those who've kind of worked with NetBox for quite a while, quite a history with NetBox might recall that in the past we've been running 1-month betas. But this time we decided to change it up and reduce that to a 2-week beta period. And that's why beta only started at mid-April. The idea is still to launch on May 1st. So we're still keeping with the 4-month cadence on NetBox minor releases, but we've just compressed the beta period to 2 weeks. And just for everybody's interest, the reasoning behind that is to give just a little bit more time to the NetBox maintainers to get some additional features into a release, but also to kind of compress the beta time period so that you could concentrate more of the testing in a shorter period of time instead of dragging it out over a month period like it was in the past. So we'll see how this works out this time around, and then we'll revise to see if we stick with this cadence or do something else next time. But that's just to give you kind of some visibility into that. So again, we're still tracking to a May 1st release of NetBox 4.3. There's a lot of great enhancements. There's on a number of kind of existing features. There's some really interesting new capabilities that are brought in, and I'll just highlight a few of them. The whole list is available in the release notes that I've listed there. Those are obviously the beta release notes, which will might kind of slightly change or be tweaked before we go to the overall GA release, but they're pretty close. But 3 big features that I thought I would highlight. One of them is, and I think the most exciting of them is, we're now going to support module type profiles as well as with custom attributes. What does that all mean? Well, it's the idea that now you can create profiles for modules, and each one of those profiles can have its own set of attributes. And that will allow you to model things like power supplies and GPUs and CPUs and other components like that that go into devices and have the attributes specific to the profile. And so you'll be able to be able to model your infrastructure in a much more precise way than we have been in the past. So I think that's a really exciting feature, particularly for those that are using NetBox to model and manage their data centers. A couple other things. There's now going to be hierarchical device roles. So in the past, roles for devices were kind of a flat structure. Now they can be hierarchical, where they have a parent-child relationship. So for example, you can create a role called switch, and underneath that, you can actually have different types of switches that become children of that parent role. And then finally, another more specific use case specific feature, but still nonetheless very useful for those who need it, is the periodic synchronization of data sources. So for those who are using data sources in NetBox to connect to repositories and such, now you can actually schedule updates so that updates will be pulled in as they happen on a scheduled basis, instead of having to manually go and trigger that. So just a highlight of 3 kind of big features. There's plenty more. Please take a look at the release notes to find out more. Now, we'd love you to join the beta program that really helps make NetBox better, just by kind of detecting kind of issues or bugs and other little issues like that before we go to GA. So the more eyes we have on it, the better the release. There's different ways to get started if you're interested. You can obviously download NetBox in the traditional kind of Python Django app way at the NetBox repository, and just kind of download the beta from there. The beta should also be available as a Docker container as part of the NetBox Docker project. I actually looked this morning, to be honest, and the image wasn't there yet, but usually they publish a beta image, so I expect it's just a matter of hours before that image should be available. And then finally, we've stood up a demo environment, similar to the standard demo NetBox environment, but one specific for the beta if you're interested in just kind of looking around on the UI and not necessarily installing it locally. So whichever way you go, we'd love you to take a look at it, and we'd love to hear your feedback on the NetBox 4.3 release. On that, moving on to the next set of news, which is Diode 1.0. So this is maybe a little bit of insider information, in the sense that whether you've played with Diode or not, this news will be more or less relevant to you. But I know that there are a number of people in the community who've started using Diode since we released this like early summer last year. And have kind of been exploring kind of the possibilities with that. And that's been in what we call a public preview since then. We've never officially GA'd Diode. And we've been doing a number of enhancements to it. And now the time has come to release those enhancements. And we will be doing that on April 24th, which is Thursday of next week. So one of the important things to note is Diode 1.0. Why we're calling it 1.0, we're jumping kind of from a 0 dot release, is because there are breaking changes, and those were necessary to allow us to really expand what Diode does. So Diode was, as I mentioned, it was a public preview project. It was done to, validate the approach and the technology to see whether it actually addressed specific customer use cases, and to kind of solicit feedback. But in certain ways, it didn't kind of support all of the customer use cases. There were some significant limitations on it that you needed to be addressed. And the most important of those is expanded list of object types. So original Diode only supported a limited set of NetBox objects. Now we've greatly expanded that to practically every core NetBox object will be supported in Diode, starting with Diode 1.0. And that unfortunately introduced the need to make some breaking changes to have that full list of supported objects. But I think it's for the better, and so I wanted to highlight that is coming. This capability, even though we won't in the initial release won't be there, but we've also added the capability, or the potential, I should say, to be able to support plugins, objects as part of Diode. So in the future, we expect to be able to expand the list of supported objects to not just include core NetBox objects, but to also include objects that might be coming from plugins. So part of that supported object types, we've also expanded the list to include a greater list of attributes, and most importantly, custom fields. So now custom fields are also supported in Diode. So if you've got some core objects that you've extended, you'll also be able to pass custom fields as part of the Diode API and SDK. So this all brings, will all work with, starting with NetBox 4.2.3 and above. We've also introduced branching support in Diode, where now you can actually, data that's actually being ingested in Diode can actually be sent to a branch. So instead of writing directly to the main database in NetBox, you can actually write to a branch where things can be reviewed there prior to being merged into the database. And then finally, the last big difference in Diode, and also part of the breaking changes, we've changed the authentication mechanism between Diode clients and Diode itself. And so we've made it more secure, and we've been able to, with a more modern kind of authentication mechanism between client and server. So you can find all about that, you can get going and play with Diode in the repo that you see there. But as I mentioned, the actual 1.0 will actually be released on April 24th. So that's next week. So be on the lookout for that, particularly those who've been working with prior releases of Diode. This will be a significant change in features and functionality. The last piece I want to mention is kind of tied to that and I talked about that in the webinar that we're going to have about the discovery agent next week. We'll also be releasing an updated version of that discovery agent next week to start leveraging some of these new capabilities in Diode. Things like obviously the enhanced client authentication mechanism, but also the expanded list of object types. So those will be part of the new version of the discovery agent, which will be published at the same time as the new version of Diode. So I know that was a lot of information, but we're really excited about the new capabilities this will be providing, and the unlocking of many new use cases that customers had been and users had been telling us they would like to use Diode but weren't able to because of some of its limitations. So I think this really opens up the door to many, many more use cases than we've had in the past. So hopefully you'll have a chance to look at it and have some success with it. And now that I've done all my rambling, I think it's time to move on to the really interesting parts, which are our guest speakers. And so we'll start first with Niclas, who will be talking to us about NetBox and NSO.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm good. So I'll take our screen sharing. Hope it just works. Is my screen visible? Good. So hello, everyone. My name is Niclas. I work for a Danish ISP called Norlys. As you can see in that name, it's kind of visible on the side of the WAN. My name is Niclas. There's a bunch of stuff on this. I've been doing network automation for a few years now full time, and I do a bunch of other stuff on the side, mostly building tents and stuff for fun. I work for a company called Norlys, and the quick explanation of Norlys is we are Denmark's soon to be, hopefully, if the latest acquisition goes through, the largest fiber ISP in Denmark, we're covering 880,000 homes right now, and we're going towards 1 million homes. So we do a lot of fiber, and we do a lot of projects. So what have I talked about? In Norlys, we introduced NetBox a good few years back now. We started in 2020. It's the around time that we started using NetBox for real and in big terms. We did this to a big integration project, rolling out a new network. So migrating 1,000 new or deploying 1,000 new network devices within 10 months of a year. And those 10 months included building everything we needed to do the rollout. So that went well and that went quick. So that worked, was very nice, and we got a lot done in that time. Since then, our NetBox has evolved quite a bit. We do a lot in NetBox, and we do a lot of integration in NetBox to try and make everything easier. So we do a lot of integrations to make everything easier for people. You can see Cisco ISE, Cisco NSO, and all these stuff. So all of these things to try and make everyday life easy. And that is the goal in the end, trying to make everyday life easy for our engineers. So it's easy to do what they need to do to get the network moving, to make all the changes needed and handle everything we got. And you get a lot of things when you have a fiber network this big. Like, for example, me today having discussions about a POP needing to be moved 40 meters. That's a thing. We can't do anything about that. That's just how it is. So, but in the system, all you see the integrations here is the goal is to make everything easy. So I will take Cisco ISE as an example, and I'll come into NSO very soon. When an engineer creates a device in NetBox, it is instantly, within 2 seconds, if we're talking numbers, visible and nice, created, all the settings, everything done. There's nothing more for the engineer to do than that. They don't need to enter Cisco ISE, they don't need to know anything, all that stuff. And that's what we're doing, trying to do with a lot of integrations, just to involve less people in doing systems and involve less processes in creating new devices. So one of those things and things we are involving in that is just, we have a lot of systems that just needs data to do their thing. But we also want to help the engineers or my colleagues to actually roll out the configuration. So that's the one thing we've been working towards for a while now. And I'll go through these slides quickly from a longer presentation. A lot of what you see in NetBox and what we also did in the start is you go from the network and then you put data into NetBox. We're reaching the point of stopping that and actually heading towards taking data from NetBox and pushing it out into the network more and more. And this is because we have external systems. There are some of the systems, there are northbound sales oranges, BSS systems that pull resources. So we are at the point now where we can't have two sources of truth. We need NetBox to be the source of truth. So we know that what we are selling is actually available. So we don't end up selling a port for some service, which has then actually been used by some internal guy to do an internal service. So we're very much going towards saying NetBox is the source of truth and we push out from there. That's not saying we're not going to be pulling data from the network, but what we're going towards is doing verification. And I'm definitely going to be there next Tuesday for the NetBox discovery. As we're definitely going to be implementing that later in the year, hopefully. But we're going to be going in and saying, okay, what was in the network, what's in NetBox? Okay, there's something that's out of line. And then we're going to write a case to someone to go fix that. So that's the direction we're heading on. To help people in their everyday life deploying config, we decided we want to sync services. And services is a term for you when you use Cisco NSO, which is a project we use for provisioning of both customer services and internal services now. And a service is just a abstracted version of something. It's not, it's basically, I want an MPLS link with these options. That instead of having to say, I want an MPLS link on the Juniper and this, and this config, no. I want an MPLS link. And so you handle whatever's on the device side and handle whatever translation is needed for whatever vendor we have, because we have multiple vendors in our network. So this is very nice for us. So I went into making this at some point saying, hey, I want some stuff. I want to be able to do dry run verification as a first day thing, because I want to build trust in engineers. I don't want to duplicate values because that's hard. I want to be able to support multiple sources of record. So if I need to pull data from some other system than NetBox, for example, I need to be able to do that. If there's anything I need, for example, a password manager is the example I often use. I need services in two groups, services that are local for device or services that are global. So services like local services would be like an MPLS link. We have one of those that's specific for that device. A global service could be like syslog. I have 500 devices that needs this config. So if I go into the process and talk about the solution, on the left side, you have NetBox, which holds our DSIM EPAM data. We have the NetBox and the network on the right side. I already told you about NSO. So we're going to have NSO pushing to the network. So that thing is simple. To integrate those two, because of similar thing, a lot of the integrations you see, they use Fast API as it's simple. It's Python. We know Python. I have lots of people in my teams that know Python and work with Python. So we decided to build the integration layer using Python. And Fast API is a nice API to use to get a REST API on top of Python, which has lots of documentation resources. So we decided to continue with that. Then I need a GUI, and writing GUIs is not my favorite thing. So I thought, how can I make life easier and also avoid making a GUI for people? And the choice was simple. I made a NetBox plugin. So it's a plugin in NetBox. It gives the user the ability to create something without ever leaving NetBox, as you will see in my short demo. And it's very nice because it avoids people having to go from system A to system B to system A. If there's anything messing up, it's quite nice in that process. So if we go through the process real quickly, when a user or a system requests a dry run, it goes up to the Fast API. Fast API then requests data back from NetBox, going back to itself. Once we do that, we go to NSO saying, hey, NSO, I want to deploy these services. NSO then runs a dry run. And if you then accept that dry run, it will be returned or it will be, once it goes to NSO, it will return all the way to the user and then go through the whole thing again before it goes to the network. And that is to ensure that we give the user a dry run and the user can then accept this. If the user accepts it, it sends it out to the network. So the demo, I'll do a quick demo here. The simple task, and the engineer has been tasked, make this MPLS link. I need a link between these two PEs. So please do that. It needs to be 2 times 10 gig. So the engineer goes into NetBox. He finds the two devices saying, hey, okay, they're in NetBox. They're NCIS 55A2s. They're IRSXR devices. All good. Goes in and finds available ports on both devices, saying 14, 15 is available on both. Makes it simple. You can give the technician an order saying, hey, 14 to 14, 15 to 15. It's very nice and easy. The engineer then goes in to use NetBox scripts. And for this meeting, I'll explain NetBox scripts quickly. Or there's a lot, I'm guessing most of you know here, we use NetBox scripts extensively, to the point of we having around 20K lines of code in NetBox scripts. And I have a full-time developer basically only doing NetBox scripts. So we use it a lot. Then the engineer then gets all the data he has gathered for when there were ports and everything, enters it into the script. The script does its magic, goes through all of this stuff, and it creates everything, gathers bundle IDs and everything else we need for this process. After this process, you can see that, hey, we have some data. It has created physical cables, it's created links, grafted IPs, everything else needed. And to generate the service data, what we send to NSO, we use config context. So here you see a snippet from config context of the two services that will be created on each device, of course, with different data slightly. And this data is then used to push the NSO. All the references that look like Ginger are Ginger. and they will be used to avoid duplicating data. So when it gets sent to the Fast API, the Fast API will go through all these Ginger references and replace them with the actual data, which means I only have description in one place, keeping my single source of truth. So I want to execute this and send it to the network. On the device, there's a new button for our plugin, which if you can see, there's a small button that says NetBox NSO Sync. If you click that button, you will be put into this view where you will get the dry run presented to you. You can then do refetch or apply. Refetch will recheck the dry run if there's been any changes. Apply will then apply the dry run. If you go into pressing apply, it will go through, send the configuration beyond. And if everything goes well, it will complete the patch. And in the network, we will see this. We will see that the interfaces were down when we started. And afterwards, we have interfaces up, configured, OSPF is up. And that's how you make an MPLS link and out-of-band network now. It's very easy and very nice. Small thing we use on NetBox that we like, is a small feature we made, is there's a note here that says, can you plan it and document and return documentation for the new link? How do we do that? In the script, there's a small hidden message. You'll notice that it creates what we call an object case. It's basically just a tag. And that tag is basically used to look up resources. So we can look up everything attached to that creation of devices and see everything that is related to it. So we can give the technician, hey, these are the cables you need to run from A to B. They are single mode fibers from here to here. So yeah. So that's a lot we're going on. And then I have a lot of next steps I won't go through, but they are mostly NSO based. One thing we've added in the new version of the plugin that is hopefully gonna go into production soon is that we can now see if the devices are in sync or out of sync, which means I can start doing compliance. Is the device in sync with the configuration that I expect and try to send to it? So that was the quick run through of this. That was all I had to share.
Exciting stuff, Niclas. That's really exciting stuff. And I don't know if Mark, if you're there, I think it might be worthwhile jumping into talking some of the new capabilities around. I'm thinking of the custom objects plugin that's kind of in the works, and some of the work that you're doing, Niclas, seems to converge, and there could be some value there. I don't know if it's kind of worth kind of going over at a high level, Mark, or do you want me to?
I need no pushing to talk about custom objects. Yeah, I'll just start by saying, Niclas, awesome presentation, and thanks for cutting it down from, I think it was an hour at DKNOG, the original one.
I had 25 at DKNOG. I presented it in a more technical version for Chris at some point, and Cisco last year was an hour. So cutting it down to 25 and now 15.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, you're getting good at it. Amazing stuff. Yeah, so custom objects, for anyone who hasn't heard of it yet, is essentially the ability to create your own object types in NetBox. So the simple example we always use is like DHCP scopes. So, today in NetBox, you can approximate a DHCP scope by having an IP range and a couple of maybe custom fields on that. But with custom objects, you can create something that's actually called DHCP scope that includes an IP range and everything else. And I think probably the reason why you thought that was relevant, Richard, is that when you get to the kind of fancier stuff that Niclas and team are doing, it sometimes becomes really useful to be able to model things in terms of what does the business care about? Like maybe there's a contract, or maybe there's an installation, or maybe there's an application or something else that we wouldn't necessarily put into NetBox itself, but it makes sense for your business to be able to link that to things that are already in the NetBox infrastructure model. So be on the lookout for that. It went to private preview on, I want to say, Friday evening.
That's definitely something we're going to be looking into. DHCP is on one of our to-do lists. We have several, but yeah, it's something we're doing where we are using currently, which could alleviate some of the tags we're using, because we're using a lot of tags. I think I checked my tags table yesterday and I had, was it a few million entries?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
our
Well,
netbox is quite big. So I have 250K VLANs or something like that alone. So
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking when you're talking about the object case tags there. That's kind of a second-class citizen when it comes to modeling services. And this custom objects would allow you to create kind of first-class citizens where you could actually create relationships between those objects in a truly modeled way. And I thought, there's good synergies there. And so great stuff. And the other piece of feedback I wanted to give you, Niclas, the approach of using plugins to create a UI with Fast API, that's actually the similar mechanisms that we're doing with NetBox Assurance, and Diode, where it's actually we're providing a plugin. We're providing a UI as a plugin in NetBox, but the actual service itself is completely outside of NetBox. So that's a pattern that we're using as well. So that was really exciting to see as well. So
it's a really nice pattern. It also helps with access control and all that stuff. So we're in Denmark, our internet is classified as critical infrastructure, which means that we have high regulation amount for all this stuff. So it's very nice to avoid having another source to have to deal with all that. So it's nice to hear that other people are doing it too, especially that it's you guys.
very cool. Thanks, Niclas. That was very interesting. Just for the sake of time, I think we'll pivot over to Bertrand.
Yes, so I will take over the screen. Let me just prepare everything. Yeah, so. Okay, so my name is Jogo Drebo. Actually, my name is not Bertrand. Bertrand is the name of my supervisor, but he can't present now. So I'm presenting. He's also in the meeting, but I couldn't change the name, so I kept the name Bertrand. I feel a little bit better like this. So we are working in a company which is named SaaShup, and we have multiple services there. One of them services is called SaaShup. It's to provide micro SaaS to customers so they can build their own SaaS platform and send it to other customers of them, and then so we ship billing systems and authentication systems and everything with it. Another project that we have is PassUp, which is used as a platform as a service, and we use only NetBox in it to manage the whole micro data center. So that's actually a micro data center. We ship all 7 layers of the OSI in it. So we can manage the devices, we can manage the networking part, we can manage the cables. And what we do today, the most interesting part, is we manage the virtual machines and everything inside the virtual machines based on containers. So in the layer of 1 to 3, we do manage the subnet routings, VLANs, contacts, and so on. And we have another agent which is developed internally, and which is a create VM agent, which will deploy a VM based on all the other informations put inside. So for example, you can choose between OVH, OpenStack, sorry, or AWS or vCenter, and then it will deploy the virtual machine on this infrastructure. So our PaaS platform is not only based on in our data center, in our vendor, but we can deploy it on a customer infrastructure. So if they have Nutanix, we can deploy it there. Our VM agent will work with everything of them. So we focus on this. And then we have the other layers, which we present today, is the 4 to 7, is we have a NetBox Docker plugin, which we use mainly to manage Dockers on each VM. So you can create containers, you can create images, volumes, and everything through NetBox. So and also we do manage cloud. We have a Cloudflare plugin which allows us to manage the DNS and certificates, reverse proxy, and all whatever we want directly to our NetBox. So we have the same approach as done before. Is we use NetBox as our single source of truth, and we deploy everything through NetBox. So nothing comes back to NetBox, but it's NetBox who does say the truth and who deploys on different platforms. Of course, we have some agents running, or the Cloudflare plugin does direct calls to the Cloudflare, for example. But for the NetBox Docker plugin, we do have developed an agent in no code using Node-RED, which we deploy on each VM, which allows the interaction between NetBox and the virtual machine on directly. So here we can see how the NetBox Docker agent works today. So we have a NetBox. Whenever you push something in NetBox, it will execute a webhook, which connects directly to Node-RED agent, the NetBox Docker agent. And then this agent will connect to Docker API. So we do it mainly throughout the Unix socket. So we don't expose directly the TCP socket to the internet. And then once the action is executed, the agent will call back NetBox and give different states, journals, or if something is wrong. So we also have a state approach, is that each action has a different state. When you click, it becomes in a state of creating. When it's running, it becomes in a state of running. When it's failing, it does have a state of excited, and so on. So the customer do see everything inside NetBox the same as you will see if you run a Docker PS or something else local on the machine. So now we will do a small demo about how this works today. I do prepare the live demo, so I do not have prepared slides of a demo, but I prepared something in advance that the demo will not take a lot of time. Let me just switch the screen. So this is our NetBox instance. And you can see in our NetBox instance, we have two different plugins. For example, now we have Cloudflare, which would allow us to create different records and so on. But the most important plugin is Docker. For the other plugins, we can do again a presentation in the future once we advance it a little bit more on the development of the plugin itself, because today it's currently extremely limited to just our use cases, but we want to expand it to use cases of different clients. So in the Docker plugin, as you can see, we have different menus. One is host, registry, image, volume, networks, and containers. But what interests us the most is now the host themselves. So once you, for example, I will show you if you add a new host. Things are a little bit slow because I choose the really minimal instance of NetBox. But yeah, so once you connect, if you want to connect a Docker agent, you just need to put the name and the endpoint directly. That's all that is needed for this part. And if you go now to the host himself, you will see different attributes. For example, you can see how many images are running, are existing on the machine, how many volumes exist there, all the networks, all the containers, and how many registries. If you go down, you can see there is one container running, which is the agent himself. And then I downloaded an image in advance, HTTP bin, because it's actually 500 megabytes and it takes, let's say, 1 minute before it deploys. So I wanted it to be a little bit more faster. And then you can also see that we have a container running and this image associated. So you can see directly how many containers are using the same image. The same goes for volumes. You can see how many volumes are mounted in how many different containers, and also the network part. And here we can see the container themselves do have different states. For example, the host have a state which is running with the agent version, Docker API version, and each log, each execution is also logged in the journal part. So we can see in the journal if something went wrong or if everything is working fine, and each operation will also be logged inside. For example, just before the demo, I did an agent refreshed just to be sure that everything works fine, and I didn't destroy anything before the demo, because there's always a demo effect that something goes wrong, but this time it went well. We can also see that, for example, I removed the container, I restarted the agent, and that I downloaded some images and so on. So we go now for creating a new container. Like I said, you will use the HTTP bin container. Let's just put a name. And then we go to create. Now, if we go to the container directly, we now see different informations. For example, we can already see the container ID. We can see the default labels which are associated, the default environment variables, the default network settings, and the port mappings. But the container is in a created state. So in Docker, when you create a container, it's not started. It's first in a created state, and then you can put different configurations. For example, now we will put some port mapping on the container himself. AD, save it. And then we can just recreate the container. You see, there is now an operation ongoing, which is called recreate, and new journal entries are created. For example, the container created and the operation recreate is still pending. It's not yet done. After a few refreshes, you will see that we now have new states, new journal entries, which will say that recreate went okay, and that operation none, because none is not a real operation, it just satisful, is okay now. So when we go back to the container, we can now see that the state is running, and also that the port mapping is working correctly. So just to a little bit demo is we try to access this virtual machine, and we have HTTP bin container running. We do have also some protection. For example, we cannot delete a running container. You first need to stop this container. Yes, the delete button is there, but if you click, nothing will work. Also, it will not work. You just we did not yet find out how in NetBox to show just some buttons in different cases. We need help in the future to improve this part. But for example, I can stop the container now. And again, we have different states in journal. And the state is done. So now it displays start, and we can see it's not working. And now we will delete it, the container. This means it will delete all the different association. And it's done. This was the demo for the Docker agent.
Very interesting. That's quite the orchestration you've got going on there. Be curious to understand what was kind of the impetus of building this. It was just was it to make it just streamline the process of onboarding these things? Was it just to make it easier and less error prone by being command line utilities and scripts and things like that? Kind of what was what got you started down this path?
The idea is actually that our PaaS platform will be managed by the customer himself. So sometimes it's non-technical people who will manage it, and sometimes it will be technical people who will manage it. So we needed to find the right path between those two, and to make the life easier of both of them. So for example, the technical guys, they will, for example, create probably some Ansible playbooks or Terraform files, which will then connect to NetBox. But the non-technical guys, they need to have a pretty easy way to manage the infrastructure. And so we thought that NetBox seems like a easy interface. It's extremely user-friendly. And we said, let's extend it with our custom plugins and expose this to the customer instead of saying to the customer, now run Kubernetes and so on. We know that tools like Kubernetes or I forgot the name about Docker plugin, Docker agent for VMs. A Portainer, for example. We know the use of Portainers and so on, but that will mean that the customer will have different interfaces for managing different parts. And instead of giving him this nightmare for non-technical guys, we said, let's give them the whole infrastructure in a single interface and improve it from time to time. So that's why you also saw that we have a Cloudflare plugin. We also have the create VM plugin. So if you create a virtual machine, this will deploy the virtual machine wherever you want it. So the customer doesn't need to have managed, and it will also deploy directly the agent with it and configure NetBox. So you don't have anything to do, right? It will do it for you, and you just can go directly straight from A to B, to managing your container without worrying, did I have Docker installed? Did I have other things installed? And so on. That's the idea behind it. But we need to have improve a little bit from time to time, as sometimes we get some errors with NetBox, sometimes with the container. So there will be a lot of improvement going on, but we work from day to day to do it. And it's already running in production also. So we have a few customers which are already using it with a lot of errors, but it's going fine for the moment.
Very cool. So just to highlight, there was a question about extending this plugin to support Podman, and I think the response that came out, just to read it out, is that I guess we should extend our connector to Podman API. So it sounds like it's possible. I don't know if it's planned, but
there is some idea to extend it. There is some idea to extend it to Podman and for probably others also. But for the moment, it's not yet in the roadmap, because first we want to improve the compatibility with Docker. And once this compatibility is sure that it will go fine, we will extend it to Podman and others. So step by step, we go try it. We are just for the moment a small team working on it of 2 developers. And at the same time, we also have all the other plugins to develop. But it might come fast once we have some more contributions. So everybody who wants to contribute, it's open source, and everybody can contribute also to help us improve it fast in the future. Because Podman for sure is some direction we want to go to in the future.
excellent. Great stuff. Before we wrap up this part, are there any other questions from anybody wants to post in the chat?
I've got a quick one.
I'll go for it, Mark.
I'm curious because I know you shared it in the you shared the plugin in the DevNet Slack a few months ago. Have you had any contributors so far? How's that been going?
We had some contributions from another company, but now it's a college of us, but it contributed before. It's from Link Society. They also developed some other known tools like FlowG and so on. So they use it also for their SaaS system. They use our Docker agent. So we currently now work together on improve it. And then we had some other contributions which were not major things. It was more like updating the readme and so on, the readme and so on. So not a lot, to be honest. We expected a little bit more, but for the moment it's going well. So
glad to hear it. And if you're on the call and this looks interesting, it sounds like that's an invitation to get involved. So please do.
Okay, we will do.
Well, on that note, let's kind of pivot back to our presentation, which is actually a call for speakers. So if thanks for our speakers today. I think those were 2 awesome use cases. I mean, those were really, you guys both hit it out of the park in terms of the breadth and depth and imagination of how are you using NetBox. But I'm sure there are a lot of other ideas out there. They don't need to be as big as these. There's no nothing is too big or too small to make it here. So if you have a story that you'd like to share with the rest of the community, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to give you the opportunity to share it with the rest of the community. If you're not into public speaking, that's fine. There's other ways of doing it. We can do a blog. We can do other mechanisms to share your story. So if you're interested, again, whether it's directly on this community call to present or in other ways, please reach out to us, and we'd love to share your story with the rest of the community. And on that note, I will, excuse me. An issue with my sorry about that. On that, I'd like to close the call today with by kind of inviting you to our next call, which is on Tuesday, May the 13th. I do want to highlight that you can register, and the registration is already open for the May community call. And we've also introduced an auto register. So from now on, you'll see on the site that there you have the ability to automatically register for future community calls instead of having to register month by month. And there's also an opt-out. So if ever you want to do the auto register, but you want to be able to revoke that, there is an opt-out on the auto register. So just be on the lookout for that as you register for next month's event. So on that note, I'd like to thank our speakers again. These were great discussions, great presentations. Really excited by what we have here. I don't know, did you have any parting thoughts for us, Mark? Anything you wanted to share?
No, just to echo what you said, amazing presentations. I'm excited to see feedback on the NetBox 4.3 beta, and yeah, keep your ears and eyes open for more news on custom objects.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Thanks to our speakers, and everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Richard.